Welcome, everybody, to CSR Talent Group's Corporate Leaders Podcast. Today, we are so pleased to have with us Caitlin Fabian, who has worked in the social impact space for a number of companies and also has incredibly deep experience in employee engagement, which is what we're going to talk about today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Caitlin to tell you a little bit more about her background and experience, and then we'll get into some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. First off, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. And as Tom mentioned, my name is Caitlin Fabian, and I have spent the last 15 years working at the intersection of business and community impact, like many of you all. Most recently, I was at Salesforce, where I managed a $22 million grant portfolio and led employee giving programs for more than 75,000 global employees. And prior to that, I was at Pacific Gas and Electric Company focusing on environmental conservation and building partnerships with organizations like the Arbor Day Foundation and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Working in social impact at places like these, I've learned a lot, not just about designing great programs, but really about what it takes to bring them to life and operationalize them so that they're scalable and sustainable for the teams managing them day to day behind the scenes. And through my experience in both the grants operations space and employee engagement, I've developed a unique perspective on how to connect strategy and execution, and I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper into that today.
Well, that sounds great. So you mentioned the program operations side of things. So tell us a little bit more about what you do in the space of employee engagement, especially through the lens of program operations.
Yeah, so I focus on employee engagement, like you said, Tom, through this lens of program ops. So not just what is offered, but how it actually comes to life for employees. And I like to sometimes compare it to a restaurant. You can have a really amazing menu of offerings, but if the kitchen and the service and everything behind the scenes aren't running smoothly, the experience and the impact are going to fall short. So my role is really making sure everything behind the scenes works so that employees can have easy access. They can easily participate in programs. They can get real value from things like recognition, volunteering, and culture building programs.
Mm, fantastic. So it's really the total infrastructure, which I imagine a lot of companies don't totally think through, or and some, especially with some lean teams, there are not a lot of people that work in that space.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so um, this you mentioned operations in the employee engagement space, and again, that's a fascinating topic because we don't hear about it a lot. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And honestly, it's something I feel pretty strongly about. Having started my career in the grants operations space and really having that technical and operational lens on all things in social impact. I think engagement work often gravitates towards the visible side. So think campaigns, events, storytelling. Those are the moments that people can see and feel. So it makes sense that that is what we sort of equate with social impact, employee engagement, right?
Hmm.
But those moments only land when the operational foundation is really solid. So if the platform is clunky or enrollment is confusing or managers don't know how to support it, even those best ideas, the ones we want to be able to write really exciting, reflection blog posts about are going to fall flat.
Hmm.
There's also a perception issue, I think. Operations can sound very tactical, behind the scenes, maybe a little boring, when it's actually highly strategic, in my opinion. And as workforces become more distributed and frontline heavy, companies are realizing engagement can't just be moments. It has to really be embedded into how people work every single day, making this operations lens even more important.
Mm. Yeah, it's fascinating. It makes so much sense, and I am surprised that we don't hear more about it. So, tell us about an example of a program you've operationalized successfully. Give us some more details about what that looks like.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And what I often come back to is my time at Salesforce. So I was there for about 6 years. And during that time, at the end of my tenure at Salesforce, My team was tasked with revamping our global employee giving and volunteering program. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Salesforce's program, we were very much already seen as a leader in the social impact space. Engagement was strong, participation was strong. So, the goal wasn't really to fix something that was broken, it was to take our programs to the next level. And so, over the course of about 2 years, so this didn't happen overnight, we ran design thinking sessions. We tested multiple iterations with employees and nonprofits and leadership to really understand what balance of programs resonated. And we kept refining based on feedback. We ultimately landed on what was a more gamified experience, what we called citizen philanthropy at the time, built within the Salesforce platform that could meet employees wherever they were at on their giving journey. So highly customizable. Think it's your first time volunteering, you get a badge. If it's your 100th time volunteering, you get a badge and a special recognition award. And this all sounds really great in theory, but as you can imagine, it required a lot of work behind the scenes to actually bring it to life. So my role primarily was to partner closely with IT, other internal stakeholders to build and test a prototype for this, to test the full user experience from end to end, to make sure it worked across different roles, locations, levels of access. And we also had to think about things like data tracking, reporting, manager enablement, how to scale it without adding complexity for the end user. So that's one example that stands out to me. And yeah, it was a really impactful program at the end of the day, but took a really strong operational lens to implement and to make it meaningful for employees so that they could actually go in and volunteer, track their hours, and get recognized for their contributions.
So you mentioned impactful, meaning more people participated, more hours, greater enthusiasm and excitement about the program.
Great question. All of that.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, we already had a lot of that happening at Salesforce. So we were also looking to redefine what impact meant as part of this program redesign. And what that looked like, what we discovered through a lot of these design thinking sessions was less of this one-off engagement, one-off volunteering, one-off giving. How could we really incentivize deeper ongoing engagement and commitment to nonprofits of choice?
Hmm.
So, still an open program, employees were still encouraged to give back to causes that they cared about. But how could we encourage them to engage more deeply over time to really make a lasting impact on that nonprofit's mission?
That's fantastic. You mentioned earlier that the frontline or distributed workforce, and given how many companies now have a lot of remote workers, as well as obviously the manufacturing companies that have people on the floor and not in front of a computer, how do you design programs for a frontline or distributed workforce?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of this recently in my consulting work. Post Salesforce, I started to dip my toe into the consulting space, doing social impact project-based work with a variety of different clients. And what I've noticed in terms of the frontline and distributed workforce is it really starts with designing for reality, not intention. These employees don't have the same time, tools, or access as corporate teams. So,
Mhm.
really understanding what they're facing on the day to day and building on whatever the existing lines of communication are with this frontline workforce, right? So, thinking about like however HR communicates with the frontline workforce, can the CSR team sort of build on that? And so it's streamlined. You're not giving them something new to learn. You're just adding on to the existing way of doing things.
And obviously the issues around a frontliners, well, especially in a manufacturing setting, people are not in front of a computer, so it's a little harder for them to actually
Hmm.
physically do some of the volunteering work. So it sounds like you had to address that as well, be able to give them opportunities to do things that were not taking them away from their work too much.
Yeah, yeah, really customizing the experience based on that frontline and dispersed workforce
Yeah.
population.
What about, so we often hear from companies that they really want to increase their employee engagement, the number of volunteers, and there's always this balance between large programs with a lot of people versus programs that are more personal. How do you balance those two sort of competing issues?
It's a constant challenge. And I've heard a great leader that I've partnered with before describe it as freedom within a framework.
Mm,
So, as an operational social impact leader, I see it as my job to create a framework to put guardrails in place so that an employee has the freedom to give back in a way that is meaningful to them within that framework, right?
yeah.
So they're still abiding by a policy that, the CSR team has written and socialized and implemented. So that can be really empowering for employees as
Mhm.
well, feeling like they know how to step in um, and participate in programs in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, given all your work in employee engagement, I'm just wondering what you're seeing as far as trends in the field right now, especially with we're coming out of the COVID era a little bit, and people are returning to the office. Um, what trends are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think we've all seen that teams are still fairly lean. And so we all know CSR leaders are wearing multiple hats, right?
Hmm.
So a continued trend towards automating processes, um, you know, s- partnering with, there are so many great platforms and technology solutions out there so that these teams don't have to be doing everything on their own.
Mm.
So really pulling in those teams and finding the right partners to grow and scale this work. I think I've seen more of that in the past few years, which is really exciting.
So some of those partners are capable of taking on part of this operational role that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Operational role and yeah, just designing, employee engagement platforms where
Yeah.
they take the burden of registration and reminders
Yeah.
and metric tracking and report outs after the fact, taking that off of the internal CSR team's plate to free up their time for other things.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're sort of touching on this with companies with lean teams. They may not have the budget to be able to hire a dedicated operational lead. It sounds like some of the platforms are filling in the gaps a little bit, but what's your advice for companies that either are not able to or just don't have the budget to hire a dedicated operational lead?
Yeah, great point to end on here. So I know we, all want more headcount, but if it's
Yeah.
not possible, and oftentimes it's not, my advice would be start by simplifying. So it's better to do a few things really well than to launch too much and struggle to sustain it. I always say when thinking about launching a new program, it's okay to start small and iterate and grow from there. Number two would be document the basics.
Mm.
What are you doing? Write it down. Have that knowledge transfer available so as your team grows, that documentation exists for others to leverage. And lastly, hiring. You may not have the headcount for a dedicated ops person, but you can look for those skills to round out your team when hiring.
Hmm.
So, often we prioritize looking for somebody with direct social impact experience, which is incredibly valuable, but maybe also looking for somebody with a finance background or who's worked in a business ops setting before, to sort of bring that operational lens and expertise to a team that may not, have those strengths already in place.
And of course, they can hire you.
I'm here.
I mean, you are a consultant right now, right? And you do offer this as a service. So, and of course, this is what we do at CSR Talent Group. Um, um, One final question. I always like to ask people what excites you most about this work? Is there something that you really love or a passion part to this work that gives you energy?
Yeah, as much as I love the technical side of it and being, behind the scenes and behind the scenes and in the weeds, I also just love the people and the
Mhm.
connection. I think you can't find a better group of people than those working in the social impact space. And that's what really keeps bringing me back and energizes me every day. So
Yeah.
the people doing this work in-house, the nonprofits that we get to collaborate with, the vendors, the consultants, everybody has 110% of their heart in it,
Mm.
um, which is, yeah, encouraging and makes me want to come back day after day.
No, it's so true. The people in this space are fantastic, and we've met hundreds of them. I've been honored to meet them and try to get work for everybody. Um, well, listen, Caitlin, thank you so much for your time. Uh, this has been great. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Caitlin and maybe connecting with her, feel free to reach out to us through csrtalentgroup.com, our website, or through my email, Knowlton at csrtalentgroup.com. Caitlin, do you want to give some way that people can connect with you directly?
Yes, you can connect with me directly through LinkedIn. Search for my name or Caitlin at B as in boy, D as in dog, impact.co, C-O.
Terrific. Well, thank you again for your time, Caitlin. That was fascinating. And thank you all for attending. And we hope to see you soon. Take
Thanks for
care.
having me, Tom. Have a great day.
You too.